Today we're going to talk about marking tools. What are marking tools? Marking tools are what we use when we're lining up our alterations. They can be anything from using pins to a variety of different types of markers and chalk and pens. And they can be a little bit tricky because how do you decide what you want to use? So let's start with the basics. Tailor's chalk. Everybody thinks this is the only tool. However, you will notice that if you ever worked on a wedding dress, white Tailor's chalk doesn't exactly work. So one of the first things that I consider when I'm choosing a tool is the color. We need a high contrast. So if I'm using a dark, or I have a dark fabric, I'm gonna use a light colored tool to mark it. On the other hand, if I have a white piece of fabric, like a wedding dress, I'm gonna use something like my blue water-soluble marker, and that is nice and easy to see. Okay, let's back up. Let's go back to what we've got, and then we'll show you how we use them. Tailor's chalk first. Then we've got our white colored pencil. So this is not charcoal like an actual pencil, it's colored pencil, but typically we just use them in white. Then we have our heat pens. So these are gonna go away with heat, which I will show you. A couple of different colors, black and red are our ideal, preferred. And then we've got our water-soluble marker. Often these come in this very fluorescent shade of blue, which is, like I said, perfect for the wedding dresses. So, back to our chalk. Our chalk is not chalk. That's the weirdest place to start, but it's true. Our chalk is actually a wax. And so what's interesting and important about using our chalk is we can use it on suits, wool suiting, and different types of natural fibers, but it's important to remember that this chalk leaves a waxy residue. So though that may go away with certain fabrics, specifically like wool, it doesn't go away with all fabrics. So keeping that wax base in mind, you can't use this on a lighter chiffon because you're going to end up seeing that waxy residue. That will often go away with dry cleaning, but if you're just making an alteration to a garment and not intending to clean it or dry clean it, that can be an issue that you want to keep in mind. So though the Tailor's chalk, or wax really, is a great option for specifically suits, it's not actually a universal option. So good to know. Next, we've got our little white colored pencil. This one I love, again for dark fabrics, to mark something like, oh, I'm gonna put a buttonhole right there. This is just a pair of pants I've got. So I'll sharpen this up just with a regular pencil sharpener to give myself easy small dots or very thin marks to signify different things. Now, the tricky thing about this is it needs to be essentially like brushed off. It does not go away with the iron. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm usually only using something like the white colored pencil when I know that I'm going to be covering it up. For instance, marking things like buttonholes or marking inside of a garment, never being able to be seen on the outside. That way, if there is any left over after it's been ironed and pressed and dry cleaned, it's going to be covered up by something. So this is more of a rare use case, but definitely has its benefits depending on the situation. Then we'll move over to our darker implements and our lighter fabric. These heat pins are really cool. So how these work, hold on, stop. These don't have ink in them. These ink pens are empty. We like to just buy a couple of the pens and then we buy the special ink cartridge. A little more sustainable that way so we're not throwing them away every time. But this is the perfect opportunity for you to watch me refill it. So we're just gonna slide that little bad boy in there, take that little cap off, and there we go. Oh, look at that. So that's really cool. I really like these. Very exact. See how small of a mark I can make? Let's go ahead and try the black one too, just for a good comparison. These often come in red, black, blue, and white. I find that the white ink does not show up as well as my Tailor's chalk and my colored pencil. So I could take or leave the white, but these darker colors with the high contrast are magnificent. Really, really useful. So now we've got kind of an overview, but let's talk about the most important thing after we've done the alteration. How do we get rid of all of this? So we'll start with the blue water-soluble key marker first. The water-soluble means that water makes it go away. So we keep a bottle of distilled water. Tap water ranges too much. It varies from region to region too much. So I just buy this bottles of distilled water from any grocery store. And then we keep this. Oh, isn't that crazy? And it just evaporates right away. If you get any residue at all, I'll just put the hot iron on it, give it a little bit of steam. That'll take it right out. For the rest of these, the heat pens and the chalk, we're gonna go over to the iron so that you can see how the heat will take these marks away. We're over here at the iron. I've made a couple more marks on this. This is actually a nice wool poly blend pant bottom. So as you can see, I've got a bunch of my different marks here from my Tailor's chalk. And as soon as the steam of the iron even gets close to this, they immediately go away. Very cool. This side too, as you can see very faintly, these are the little dots I made earlier with that colored pencil. So again, as you can see, those do not go away with the iron. They can fade with a little bit of agitation, but again, more of a permanent tool, whereas this, I can mark that as many times as I want. For instance, on a suit waist or a pant taper to say, I want to come in this much, and then sew, and then come back through and get rid of anything that I don't want or don't need anymore. So again, an incredible tool, but with the caveat of wax base. So you just want to always test on any fabric that you're going to be using it on so that you can get a good feel for what the right choice is on the right fabric. Now, let's take a look at our cool heat pens. So again, I've got my black and my red. And as soon as we put even hover, I didn't even touch it that time, hover it over, that's when it's starting to go away. Now, one important thing to notice, these ink pens also have a little bit of a wax base. So with this particular satin on this fabric, this is something that I would have tested to see before. This is a small mark that I made with the chalk. And these are from the pen. As you can see, both have enough of a waxy base to them that they're leaving an imprint behind. This is often something that can be corrected with dry cleaning, so that's not a big deal. However, you don't want to dry clean an entire wedding dress just to get the alterations marks off of it. So the other thing that I will say, other than testing, test. Make sure that you use these different types of tools that you'd like to utilize in your practice on samples of different kinds of fabrics. The other thing that you want to do definitely is use them conservatively. Try not to mark everything up like crazy and just assume that it's going to go away. All of these tools, they have these specific purposes, but they're also unique to every circumstance, and they have different features depending on what we're working with. So let's go back over the table and look a little bit more at some of our other options. And finally, when all else fails, there are always our pins. So 2 ways that we will mark garments, or at least get the fit right on ourselves or on the customer, and then translate to the markings or to the measurements later, are safety pins, closed end safety pins. And I've got them in a couple of different sizes, and these guys are really cool actually. They are a special anodized steel. Is that a word? I think that's it. I'll look it up. These guys are very strong, very sharp, and I get them in a couple of different sizes depending on what part of the garment and what part of the body I am pinning. So if I can't make a good mark to use for my measurements later, I will just mark something just with the pin. So instead of actually pinning it to say, let's make this part tighter, I will just slide that pin in to signify this is where I want that hook and eye to go, or any other notes that I like. The reason that I use the safety pins, and this is really important because I get asked a lot, well, why not straight pins? You know, maybe grandma always used straight pins. The reason I use safety pins is because nobody likes getting poked. It's really hard to take off a garment with a smooth, open-ended straight pin poking into you. So the safety pins are just that, safer. They close, they're not gonna poke you, they stay in place, and they really give you a good, accurate marker indicator of the alteration you're trying to perform. And finally, when truly all else fails, such as with leather, let's say, we've got some of these. Now, normally I don't have to use the really big guys, but what we'll do is clamp the garment in place. I may also use these sometimes with heavy lace that I can't get these pins through. But we'll clamp things in place and then take pictures of it. I'll even take pictures holding a tape measure up. So we've clamped this much in, and then I'll hold this up and have somebody take the photo for me. So there are a lot of options if marking isn't the right way to go, making a physical mark onto the garment for fear of damage or it not being able to go away, whatever the case. Or the alternative to pins when you're afraid to poke a hole in something that you think won't heal. Between our clamps and our pins and our color pencil, chalk, pens, markers, we have got an awesome array of tools to use for marking, indicating, or generally taking notes on the alteration that we're going to perform. How should I finish? Should I just finish it? Is that it? Is that the whole video? Like, subscribe, leave questions and comments, and join us next time. Thank you so much. See you soon.